What's happening, people? Back with another reaction, back with some more Propagandhi, and we're going back to Potemkin City Limits again, and I'd like to issue a maybe month and a half, maybe 2 month overdue apology to Ryan. Shortly after he had found my old channel, he had requested Rock for Sustainable Capitalism, and I thought I had done it, and recently when I reacted to, was it Die Jugendmarsch shirt? No, it was the Iteration, the one I did just a couple days ago. I remember thinking like, oh yeah, I think I've done Rock for Sustainable Capitalism. It was wrong. I never actually got around to it, which I thought I had, so that's my mistake, but we're here to do it now. This tune, as I think many people know, is sort of a shot at the commercialization of punk rock, the winnowing out and the evaporation of sort of the anti-establishment ethos, the rejection of antiquated thinking, and sort of the critical and sort of dissident nature of punk rock as it emerged late 70s, early 80s, and that sort of ethos that by the 90s, by the late 90s especially, and by the time you get the Vans Warped Tour, which is mentioned in this song, and which I went to once in the late 90s as a teenager, though to be clear, already by then I was thinking, there's a lot of like corporate entities here, with their own booths, and there's all these T-shirts for sale, and it seemed kind of like rebellion. A rebellion against what? Nothing. It's just rebellion for sale on a T-shirt, and that's the sort of like plastic facade of the punk ethos that we're now commodifying and marketing and sort of. And again, I think the more that punk was accepted by the mainstream, the more the mainstream music industry wanted to change it into a sort of like fashion style rather than a sort of like a life ethos and a constant desire to improve oneself and to understand situations not just from their own perspective, but sort of the muckraking nature of early punk rock had seemed to be winnowed out and evaporated by the time you get to tours like the Warped Tour and so on. And I know a lot of very popular bands, and including Bad Religion. I'm a big fan of Bad Religion. I know they've been on the Warped Tour and so on. So again, I realize these things are complicated. There's a song by 88 Fingers Louie called Punk Rock Rulebook where they talk about we do need to make money, and although I try as best I can to make sure that I know where the money's coming from and that it's not from people who do other things that are very objectionable, ultimately, I gotta get by, and you don't know me, you don't know my creative process, so do me a favor, close your punk rock rule book and stop being the ultimate arbiter and judge on what is punk rock or what is not punk rock, or how much money one can make making punk rock and so on. So I realize there are different sort of ways to approach this issue. And I realize also, a song like Dead Kennedys, where do you draw the line? It's like, I know anarchists who can go on Star Trips too when no one's ever pure and right but themselves. So to be clear, the fact that I love this song and the fact that I think Propagandhi and Chris makes a great point in the song is not necessarily a condemnation or a rejection of NoFX or Fat Mike or Fat Records or anything like that. I realize that in any dispute there are multiple ways to look at it, and even if I might be more inclined to support one side's position, I do recognize that there will be multiple perspectives and there might be genuine concerns, legitimate concerns around the table, if you will. So again, this isn't necessarily a knock on NoFX, or I think maybe some of the lines, I remember reading somewhere that a couple of the lines may be taking shots at like Rancid or Lars Fredriksson and the Bastards, which reminds me of an interview I read of, I think, Stizza from Leftover Crack, and he was saying that like when they were on Hellcat, he got a sense that maybe Rancid and maybe Hellcat overall was like, signing groups that had like misogynistic lyrics, or at least like weren't as sort of like pluralistic and in support of women as they like claimed to be. So again, I think different bands and different people have different perspectives on this, but I really do enjoy it. I haven't heard any of I think NoFX, they wrote 2 songs that are a reply to this. I stopped listening to NoFX around the time of Punk and Drublick. That's not really a knock on them, they just weren't a band that I continued following. But again, I really do think it's fair to say that, like, if you really sort of respect and appreciate the bands in the early 80s and so on, when punk was really kind of finding its feet and what they were trying to do, then it seems weird to sort of like, hey, let's go on this tour that's sponsored by Coke and Carl's Jr. and, all these major companies that, have subcontractors in places that maybe don't do the greatest treatment of their employees and so on. So, like, ultimately these are complicated matters that, you know, bands and fans will have to come to decisions on their own. But I think it's a great point that, like, look, if we're selling, if punk albums come out to, like, just be about sales numbers and, like, oh, how much merch are you selling and so on, it feels like the real essence of what this music was about and what sort of the people, the ideas that they were trying to convey, I feel like it's been lost somewhere. So again, I sympathize greatly with the song, even if that's not necessarily a criticism of, you know, people who sign to a label that's bigger because it's going to give them a little bit more financial stability and perhaps allow them to continue as a band more like functionally or whatever. Again, I get that there are multiple concerns, but I love this song and I think it makes a fantastic point. So here we go. This is Propagandhi, Rock for Sustainable Capitalism, on their 2005 album Potemkin City Limits.
Millionaire prances around my private west, selfish marionettes. My manager is kind of real shaking hands with that incredibly never selection of patriotic schemes. I like the message it says. Fucking goof.
Calling someone a goof is always funny. That little riff of when they come back in. Come on. I like that line. When did punk rock become so safe? Again, like rebellion as a style and a fashion. Again, a line about shipping factories overseas, like, yeah, we now have our products made by subcontractors in these places where they lock their workers in and whatever. I love that yell. I feel like maybe Sue Lin does that part now. Oh. This part, a little more emotional, a little more reflective, kind of nostalgic, and he's talking about, hey, remember back when we, like, thought this was, like, about ideas and the ethos? Yeah, that's a fucking bang machine.
Not something you just bought and sold. How could we have been so naive? I think when all is said and done, just 'cause we were young.
I don't mean we were wrong.
And now I'm back and forth. All this too many till she splinters that huge way until the flowers by her grave and whisper her name.
I like that tempo shift.
If anyone out there understands, should we see a show of hands just so I know I'm not insane? Ever get the feeling you've been played? Well, that's right for sustainable capitalism that you know. We may face our scorched and lifeless earth, but there are counter-world to their share. Hold us first. That's how the world works.
That's always the reply, right? Like, you can't change the way that, like, you know, money is made and, you know, certain groups are exploited so that smaller groups can make even more money. That's just the way the world works, man. Just get used to it. We can be part of it, and you can still have your message, but you have to be part of the system. So yeah. Apologies before Todd just starts belting at us. Yeah, I really do enjoy that, and like I said, that sort of number one, that more emotional kind of, not stripped down, but it was a bit like less intense section, and then the way that it went into that tempo shift for the final part. I really do enjoy that musical progression. As I said, I think it's a very profound song, and I think while there may be a number of different perspectives that one could bring to this issue, I think anyone who's being honest would say that, punk rock, to retain the sort of essence of what it has meant for many years and for many people, the idea of making it increasingly corporatized and increasingly like commodified and, about merchandise and sales numbers and, hey, this album didn't sell as well, so maybe we're not going to sign you to a contract, and it's not really about the ideas behind it. I think that's very profound, and in fact it reminds me of an interview with Jello Biafra. I think it was like early 2000s, and someone said to him like, oh, that phrase like punk never dies, whatever, and Jello said something to the effect of, well, like, in a way, like, I hope punk will always continue, but in another way I think punk rock probably should die. I think it's become sort of a bastardized version of what punk rock meant to a lot of people in, again, the late 70s and early 80s. So yeah, like I said, I think there's a lot of different ways you could take this discussion and this debate. Let me know if you have a particular opinion. There's some more songs, as I said. I mentioned that 88 Fingers Louie song. There's a few songs that maybe have a slightly different perspective. As I said, I don't know the NoFX Reply songs, but obviously they're going to run a different way with this issue. So yeah, let me know what you think. Bring your own thoughts. Inform me of what some of these other bands may have said. But either way, I absolutely love this song. Hopefully you did too. Thank you for listening and watching, and I will see you next time. Peace.